And it's deja vu back here in Washington as another special counsel is taking on investigating former President Trump. The Justice Department's probes into January 6th and the documents discovered at Mar-a-Lago will now be overseen by Jack Smith. There are key differences, though, with this special counsel as compared to the Mueller probe. Trump is no longer a sitting president. Bill Barr is no longer the attorney general, who undercut Mueller's recommendations by famously misstating his conclusions before the special counsel could even present them. Joining me now is Andrew Weissmann, senior Mueller team prosecutor and former general counsel for the FBI. Andrew, it's so good to see you. Been wanting to talk to you about this. So first, I know you know him, so tell us, who is Jack Smith, briefly? What kind of prosecutor is he by reputation?
So I know Jack from having overlapped with him in the Eastern District of New York, where when he started, I was actually the chief of the criminal division. He is a smart, incredibly tenacious prosecutor, knows his way around the courtroom, and I think he's going to be particularly adept at knowing sort of what to follow and what not to follow. In other words, really focusing people on what's important and not letting them get distracted. So I suspect, although people are worried about delay caused by the appointment of a special counsel, I think ultimately this is going to lead to the investigation speeding up, because that's the kind of prosecutor Jack is.
And in terms of the cases, Mar-a-Lago, I think you've said this publicly, is more clear-cut. The evidence has been developed. They're almost handing it to him, and he has to make some judgments about it, maybe follow some more leads, as compared to January 6th. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if we're going to see an indictment in the short term, it's going to be on the Mar-a-Lago case. It's not that there won't be an active continuing investigation on the so-called January 6th investigation, but that is a longer-term process. And that is a difference in the Mueller investigation, where we had to create a team, and there was not a lot that was done. We were really starting basically from scratch, and that is not at all what's happening here. Here is he's inheriting two investigations, one that seems quite advanced, and he's inheriting what appears to be an extremely good team. So he's really in quite a different circumstance.
So he can use the Justice Department prosecutors, the investigators, because otherwise he would have to hire and get national security clearances on the Mar-a-Lago instances for all these people. That takes a while.
Yeah, absolutely. He, by all accounts, is going to inherit the team that is currently in place, and there's no reason not to. The agents and the prosecutors seem to be doing a fine job. They have the right experience, and they've actually been steeped in the investigation. You can tell from the argument that's about to happen in the 11th Circuit, it's the same staff there, that they're not being replaced, and there'd be very little reason to do that. We could see Jack bring in additional people, so we'll have to wait and see whether that happens.
Now, I was watching you with Rachel Maddow, and you were making the point that you think that Jack Smith should communicate more with the public along the way, not do a full Comey, which you said no prosecutor would really endorse, as he did with Hillary Clinton, but at least explain what he's doing, maybe when he makes that recommendation, get out in front of it, even though he's not facing an attorney general who would do what Bill Barr famously did, which is to preempt the Mueller probe by mischaracterizing it publicly and getting a 2 or 3 week advance on it.
Yep, Andrea, I think that's really important. I look back to the Archibald Cox example. And again, I think this takes judgment, is to know when to speak and how to speak. Your phrase of not doing a full Comey is a wonderful one. But here's an example. Donald Trump is going to say that he's a victim. He's already saying that, and he is vilifying any investigation. And if a prosecution happens, he's going to say it was political and he's being treated unfairly. There would be nothing wrong with Jack or the department explaining the DOJ precedent where people who did far lesser crimes than Donald Trump had been prosecuted. And that is the case. There are numerous people who did things that are far less egregious than what happens or appears to have happened at Mar-a-Lago who have faced criminal prosecution. And I think it would be really important to educate and enlighten the public as opposed to letting Donald Trump essentially be the one voice and the only voice that's heard directly from, as opposed to you and me trying to replace, the Department of Justice's voice by trying to balance the story by those additional facts.
Andrea Weissmann, thank you so much. It's great to have your perspective, your expertise.